People think I come on my show and I stir the pot on the left for shits and giggles, or I do it for clicks. But the reality is, I notice that there is a very big lack of left discourse, left conversation in this country. And over the years, the amount of left new media has grown, and the amount of leftists in the country, or people who self-describe as leftists in this country, has grown. But the conversation, once we all agree, yeah, single payer good, ending the war is good, corruption bad. Once we agree on that, that seems to be the end of left discourse. And the only thing we ever talk about, only thing that left new media hosts really talk about is how bad the corporate Democrats are, or even less productive kind of left discourse, the Trump derangement syndrome, 24/7, Trump bad, and that's all we're going to talk about. Trump bad, Republicans bad, and that's all we're going to talk about. Those conversations, they have their value, but I also think that there needs to be left discourse, and we need to have conversations about the details and the strategy and where we stand on certain issues. And if we disagree, we can have the fight and we can have it out and everybody can make their case. But the reason why it's important to have these conversations is because in history, when moments come, very important defining moments come. For example, like the force to vote moment, it's important to be unified in the strategy and the approach. Because if a moment like that comes, when you have the leverage of veto power in the speaker's race, when Democrats control all branches of government, or the House, the Senate, and the White House, that's not the time to be arguing about strategy and the approach. That's the moment when you take action. That's the moment when you're unified and you fight for your position and you use the leverage as a unified front. And similarly, there's moments that come, defining moments that come in history, where you need to be unified against something that's very, very bad, and it's going to threaten the entire movement and threaten progress in this country in general. And we're in one of those moments right now, where the entire political establishment, the corporate Democrats, the donor class, the big tech oligarchs, they've all come in alignment to bring about a new unprecedented wave of internet censorship on top of, or as part of, this new domestic war on terror that they seem to be trying to manufacture consent for. And you'd expect the free speech loving radicals on the left to fervently be pushing back against this censorship and this gross exercise in power from these random billionaire tech executives. You would think that the left would be at the forefront pushing back against it, or at the very least, urging caution, and for people to be more aware of the broader picture and the precedent that this sets for free speech online. But that's not the case. In fact, many people on the left are the ones pushing for the censorship. They're leading the charge for the censorship. And now that leaves us in a moment where you have, it's a fringe. Many of you in my audience and other leftists, we are now part of the fringe on the left who has to not only sound the alarm about this upcoming wave of censorship and this new domestic war on terror that's brewing. Now we have to also do that while we're fighting with a bunch of other leftists and try to convince them why censorship is bad and why it's going to turn around and bite you in the ass in the very near future. Now, of course, this is all come about from the events that happened last Wednesday, where a bunch of Trump supporters marched on Capitol Hill. I think there was like 150,000 of them out there, and thousands of them stormed the Capitol building and basically did a riot. They did property damage and they were trespassing. There were some deaths. Most of them, 4 of them, were the Trump supporters, and 1 was a police officer that was killed by them. So that's what happened on Wednesday. And this has triggered such a disproportionate response from basically everyone. It's like nobody cares about the ramifications of the massive overreaction, because they've been so emotionally triggered by the event. And again, like, this triggers that part of their brain where they just fucking hate Trump and they hate his supporters. So anything bad that happens to them, they're just on board with it. And like I've been saying, I think people need to be more critical and more thoughtful as to what's actually happening, the broad picture. So they banned Trump from basically the internet. They banned him from Google, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Snapchat. He had a Shopify store where he was selling his merchandise. They banned him from all of that. And the reasons that they gave were that he incited the violence at the Capitol. And I went into great detail in the first video I posted about this, explaining how, more than anything, this was a riot. So everybody's trying to frame it as if this was a coup and a violent takeover of government, and they were literally trying to start a rebellion. And so they're trying to pin that on Trump. I don't agree with that. It wasn't a coup. It wasn't a rebellion. And then I also just don't agree with the framing that Donald Trump directly incited violence. Now, you can say he bears responsibility for getting his supporters all riled up and feeding them conspiracy theories about the election was stolen and all that stuff. You can say he's wrong for that. You can say he bears some responsibility and he bears some blame for that. But to say that we're going to just remove him from the internet, and nobody's even citing a direct quote, a specific example of where he was inciting violence. And that's not a small detail. That is a major detail. In none of his speeches before the action outside of the Capitol, not even in his rally did he say, "Hey y'all, let's start a riot, let's do some fucking violence." He didn't say that. And so I have a problem with people acting like those are both the same thing. Acting like feeding your followers conspiracy theories and getting them worked up, acting like that's literally inciting violence, because there's a difference. There's literally a difference, a legal difference. And if you're going to say that both of those things are the same, you're just literally changing what inciting violence means, and you're making it a very broad, nebulous definition that can fit many different scenarios where people were not inciting violence. And then the other excuse is like, we can't trust him to be on the internet. He's so dangerous. He might start a coup. And like he did on Wednesday, he's going to really do it. He's going to get all his supporters out there to do a violent revolution and take over government. Again, that's not what happened on Wednesday. And nobody has addressed this point for me yet. If Donald Trump is, and I'm not saying he isn't dangerous. Of course he's dangerous. All these politicians are dangerous. All these ex-presidents are dangerous. Joe Biden coming in, he's dangerous. They're all dangerous. But the danger that people are saying with Trump is that he's going to start a violent revolution. If you think that Donald Trump was going to start a violent revolution, what better time would there have been to do it when you have the House and the Senate in the Capitol, and you have thousands of your supporters storming the building, and 150,000 of them in the street? If you were going to do a violent revolution, I don't know why you wouldn't just do it at that time. He had the opportunity, and he didn't. He went on Twitter, and he was trying to do the whole, they really did steal this shit from me, because he was trying to save face. But he's like, be calm, respect police officers, and go home. He said that in his tweet, and then he put out a video where he said the same thing. So, again, people are equating two things that are very different in value, and they're just acting like they're the same thing. They're acting like Trump riling up his supporters, and then once the riot starts, him telling them to go home and respect the police. People are acting like that's exactly the same as if Trump literally was on Twitter and in the Oval Office telling them, directing an actual violent coup, as if he was telling them, yeah, guys, go kill those politicians, go kidnap those politicians. He didn't do that, and those aren't the same thing. And I need people to stop acting like they're the same thing, because this hysteria is now being used to justify the censorship of him, and it makes no sense. And which really is what this all comes down to, is all the reasons that they're giving, they have no evidence for, and it makes no sense. So ultimately, all of this is coming down to just arbitrary censorship by these billionaire executives and oligarchs in Silicon Valley. All these tech giants, they get in a room together and decide on a whim, unilaterally, that when somebody says something that they don't like, they get to just remove them from the internet. That's really what this all is coming down to. And if they can do that to the most powerful person on the planet, they will literally do it to anybody else. You've given them license to do this to anyone else. And we're already seeing it. We're already seeing them take this moment and run with it. They're doing all kinds of censorship. Now they're censoring people for things that have nothing to do with the events on Wednesday. Now, there was news that Michael Flynn and some other people, high-level prominent people who are close to Donald Trump, now their accounts have been banned. And the reason that was given, again, nothing to do with the riot. The reason that they gave is because they were posting stuff about the QAnon conspiracy theory. Again, I don't agree with the QAnon conspiracy theory. Now, there's some truth to it, that there is a cabal, a secret child sex trafficking ring where a bunch of elites are involved in. That is true. That part of it is true. But they've taken that and spun it into this wild conspiracy theory. So I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong. I think most of the people who believe QAnon is they're delusional. But I'm not going to just say ban them from the internet, remove them from the internet. But guess what? That's what they're doing. That's what these tech companies are doing now. And it's because everybody's cheering it on. Everybody is in this primitive, primal state where they're just letting their feelings drive the boat. Trump bad. Trump supporters bad. Anything bad that happens to them, by definition, is good. And that's the end of the story for a lot of people. And there's no thought given to the reason behind the censorship, the arbitrary reasons behind the censorship, and the people who are doing the censorship, the people who are calling for the censorship. It is the establishment who's doing this. So if everybody on the left considers themselves anti-establishment, and they have these positions that would be considered radical, like ending the wars and getting money out of politics and universal healthcare, single payer healthcare, UBI. They have all these radical views and are, like I said, very strongly anti-establishment. Okay, so now you're cheering on that same establishment Oh, and by the way, they also, people on the left also want to break up these tech companies. But now you're cheering them on censoring people, and you're giving them license to just arbitrarily censor people, and you're not even making an argument how dangerous of a precedent this is. You're just cheering it on. We've already seen how they censor people on the left. Multiple stories. I covered a story a couple months ago where Facebook, there was this independent media outlet, and I guess it was based, or the source of the funding was some company in Russia, but they were paying independent journalists in different countries, in the United States, in the UK, and I think in France, some other countries. They were paying respected independent journalists to go out in the field and report on events that were happening. And then this is not my words. These are the words from an executive at Facebook. They said that the FBI came to them and said that this might be part of some Russian disinformation plot and that Facebook should remove them and ban them. And that's exactly what Facebook did. So independent media who was covering like Black Lives Matter protests and critically covering Joe Biden and things like that, they got banned just because the FBI told them to. Just completely unilateral. They don't have to prove anything. Just because they feel like it, they can do it. Remove you from the internet. And that's a news outlet. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that were removed from Facebook for similar reasons. I remember there was a prominent page that was reporting on police brutality across the country. I think they had like 100,000 followers on Twitter, or even more on Facebook, or even more than that. And there was another giant wave of censorship and purging of social media accounts, and they were part of that. They were part of that wave, and them and other pages that were reporting on police violence and police brutality, they were removed. And do you have any guess why? My guess is because it was anti-establishment, and they were calling out powerful people, and they didn't like it, so they got removed. Part of that same purge was anti-war activists, people who were arguing for Palestinian rights and calling out the Israeli genocide in Gaza and the West Bank. Those people have gotten their pages purged. The connecting theme here is anybody who challenges the establishment, anybody who is on the wrong side of the establishment, it is fair game for them to be censored. And whatever reason that they come up with, whatever justification, rationalization that they come up with after the fact to excuse it, just know it's bullshit. Oh, the fake news. We have to censor fake news. That was a whole big thing. We have to censor fake news, which is something that explicitly went after independent news and independent media like myself and other lefties that you all know online. That was the explicit purpose, and of course some other right-wing outlets too. But the explicit purpose was to go after people who were anti-establishment. It wasn't to get rid of fake news online, which I don't even agree with anyway, because who are you to decide what is fake news and what's not? But the purpose wasn't to get rid of fake news, because isn't it funny that the people who do the most fake news and whose fake news have the biggest consequences, they're never censored. Their pages are never banned. They always, no matter what it is, no matter how wrong they report on any issue, they're considered the authoritative sources just because they're powerful, established outlets. And you all know who I'm talking about: CNN, ABC, MSNBC, even you get the Fox News in there. All these major outlets, whatever they say, it's not considered fake news. It doesn't need to be censored and it doesn't need to be banned because they're authoritative news sources. They're established outlets. That has and they do the propaganda for the establishment. They will lie to get us into war. They all lied to get us into the Iraq war. And what were the consequences of that? 1 million dead Iraqis, and we destabilized the entire region and destroyed the country and created millions and millions of refugees, destroyed millions of lives. If you were serious about going after fake news online, why on earth does CNN ABC, MSNBC, Fox News, why do they all have pages? They all lied to get us into the Iraq war, and they've all lied about every single other war that they've reported on. And they are incredibly pro-war, and they do the propaganda for the military-industrial complex and war criminals. So if you're serious about combating fake news and the dangerous effects of fake news, wouldn't that be the first thing you deal with? But again, that's not the point. That's just rationalization. That's just a cover that they use because it is just an establishment crackdown on anybody who has anti-establishment views. Anybody who is critical of the government, who is critical of power in this country, those are the people who are going to be targeted for censorship. And in the case of Donald Trump, it's not that he actually challenges power. Of course not. He's an establishment politician, but he is also on the wrong side of the establishment because he offends their sensibilities. He is brash and he is rude and he calls people names and all that stuff. But this thing at the Capitol, that was their last straw because he made them actually scared for a moment. They were actually uncomfortable. And that is the biggest sin clearly, that is the biggest sin in this country. That is worse than anything you could possibly do to put fear in the hearts of the elite for a moment. And they're all putting the blame on Donald Trump for that, which is why now it is free fucking reign. They have all license that they can possibly. Nobody's going to stop them from censoring Donald Trump because he's on the wrong side of the establishment. And that's the takeaway that I need everybody to have. This isn't, they aren't actually doing this because they think that this is protecting the country. I really don't believe that because Donald Trump's been president for 4 years and they've been incredibly hyperbolic and fear-mongering about what he's going to do the entire time. And none of that has come to pass. So yes, there was an incident, there was a riot, but now everybody's acting like, oh, now he's definitely going to do a coup. There's no evidence for that. That's just your conjecture. So that it's not like this is some really, they're trying to defend the nation. And even if that was the case, censoring isn't the option. It isn't the answer. But it is really, they do not like Donald Trump. This is the best parting shot they can ever imagine. This and this new wave of impeachment that's coming. So they're going at him both barrels blazing because he crossed the establishment. That's really what this is all about. So yeah, you might not like Donald Trump. You may think he's dangerous or whatever, but that's not why they removed him from the internet. Donald Trump's been dangerous since day one. They didn't remove him from the internet then, but they did it now because he offended the establishment in a way that is unforgivable. So I'm begging people to be aware of what's actually happening. And it isn't just, this isn't an isolated incident. This isn't just, do we take Donald Trump off the internet or not? This is a power that these tech giants now have to just remove anybody from the internet. Once they all come to, and they've done it before, they did it to Alex Jones. Once they all come together, they can just agree that this ideology, this strain of thought, these group of people are bad and we should just remove them from the internet. And is that a world that you want to live in, where the oligarchs get to decide who gets to speak and gets to decide who gets to exist on the internet? And it's not just existing and it's not just speaking, which is incredibly important and it is the root of all this, but also just to do business. You can't do business if you're banned from all these different major platforms. You can't do business. You can't make a living. So we all need to be very careful about how we proceed, and there really needs to be some pushback because there is, at this moment, there's absolutely none. There's almost no pushback to this giant wave of censorship and these powers that we're giving to these tech giants to decide who gets to speak and who doesn't.